A few weeks ago, I noticed my social media feed was filled with people posting from Europe, and over again I kept seeing the same comments. It's over 100 degrees. The crowds are unbelievable. We spent half a day standing in line. I wasn't expecting it to be this hot. And it got me thinking, if someone asked me today whether they should book a Mediterranean cruise, would I tell them to go during the middle of the summer? After traveling through the Mediterranean during a couple different seasons, we've completely changed how we'll book Europe in the future. One trip was in January, another was in early May, and another later on in the year. They were all fantastic vacations, all completely different experiences. But by the end of this video, I'll tell you which one we'd choose if someone handed us 3 free Mediterranean cruises, one in January, one in May, and one in the middle of July. I think the answer might surprise you. Hello everyone, I'm Nick, and together with my husband Tony, we run Travel with Nick and Tony. Our channel isn't about taking the most expensive vacations. It isn't about luxury for the sake of luxury. It's about getting the most value out of every vacation day. Every decision we make, choosing flights, picking hotels, deciding when to travel, even choosing excursions, comes back to one simple question. Does this help us enjoy our vacation more? Sometimes that means spending a little more money. Sometimes it means spending less. Our goal is not to have the cheapest vacation, but our goal is to have the best vacation. And after several Mediterranean cruises during very different times of year, we've learned that when you travel might be one of the biggest decisions you'll make. Let me tell you about our first experience. We booked a Western Mediterranean cruise that sailed from Rome, and it included Palermo in Sicily, Malta, Barcelona, Marseille, and Genoa. There was just one catch. It was in January. Almost everyone we talked to thought we were making a mistake. Why would you go to Europe in January? It's going to be freezing. Everything will be closed. You're going to wish you waited until summer. Looking back, I'm really glad we didn't listen. We actually flew into Rome several days before the cruise because we wanted to celebrate New Year's there. And that turned out to be one of the coolest experiences we've ever had. Imagine standing outside the Colosseum, surrounded by tens of thousands of people from all over the world, listening to everyone count down together, watching fireworks explode over one of the most recognizable landmarks on Earth. It was incredible. That's one of those memories that you'll still be talking about years later. Those are exactly the kinds of experiences we travel for. Then, a few days later, we boarded our cruise, and I'll admit, before we left home, I packed expecting winter, heavy jackets, layers, cold weather. Instead, Rome surprised us. Most afternoons were somewhere around 65 to 70 degrees. Perfect weather for walking. We spent hours exploring the city, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Malta was beautiful. Barcelona was comfortable. Genoa was enjoyable. The only part that really reminded us it was winter was Marseille. Southern France was colder, windier, and if I'm completely fair, there's something magical about the south of France during the summer. The beaches, outdoor cafes, the Riviera. Winter is not going to recreate that same feeling. But here's what we gained instead. Almost no crowds. I don't mean there weren't tourists, because there were. But compared to peak summer, it felt like we had room to breathe. We weren't constantly waiting behind some enormous tour group. We could stop and take pictures without feeling rushed. We could wander through old neighborhoods simply because they looked interesting. Instead of feeling like we were being pushed from one attraction to the next, we actually felt like we were experiencing these cities. That was something we hadn't expected. The other surprise was the cost. This trip was inexpensive. Flights were cheaper. The cruise was dramatically cheaper than comparable summer sailings. Hotels in Rome were more affordable. At the time, we just thought we'd found a good deal, but looking back, we realized we'd accidentally discovered one of the best kept secrets about traveling in Europe. Sometimes traveling outside of the busiest season doesn't mean giving something up. Sometimes it actually gives you a completely different, and in many ways better, experience. We found ourselves planning another Mediterranean cruise. This time, we decided to try something different. Instead of traveling in the middle of the winter, we booked an early May cruise through the Greek islands. Once again, we flew into Rome several days before embarkation because, in our opinion, that's one of the best ways to experience a Mediterranean cruise. Rome deserves more than a day, and if you have the opportunity to arrive a few days early, I think you'll enjoy your vacation so much more. As soon as we stepped off the airplane, something felt different. Not because of the itinerary or the cruise ship, but because of the weather. It was comfortable. Not hot, not cold, just right. And that may not sound exciting, but when you're talking about sightseeing, comfortable is exactly what you want. One of the things I noticed was that we stopped thinking about the weather almost immediately. We weren't asking ourselves where the next air-conditioned building was. We weren't searching for shade. We weren't trying to figure out how much water we needed to carry. As tourists, we often feel like we have to check things off a list. The Colosseum, the Vatican, Trevi Fountain, Pantheon, then move on to the next thing. But Europe isn't about just landmarks. It's about the atmosphere. It's about slowing down. It's about wandering through a neighborhood simply because it looks interesting. It's about sitting in a piazza with a coffee and watching life happen around you. Those moments don't show up on most itineraries, but they're often the moments we remember the most. After several days in Rome, we boarded our Greek island cruise. By the end of most port days, we'd walked several miles, sometimes much more. Now, imagine doing those exact same days in temperatures over 100 degrees. Could you? Probably. Would you still have an amazing vacation? Absolutely. But would you enjoy those days as much? For us, probably not. One excursion really drove that point home. When we visited Naples, we booked a full-day excursion that included Capri, Sorrento, and Pompeii. By the time we'd returned to the ship, we'd been gone for more than 10 hours. It was one of the best excursions we've ever taken. There was so much to see. The scenery was incredible. Pompeii was fascinating and Sorrento was beautiful, but it was also a long day. Doing that same excursion during a major summer heat wave would have been a completely different experience. Instead of coming back tired because we had an incredible day, we probably would have been exhausted from the heat. One thing that really struck us during this trip was how much more important the weather becomes when you're cruising. Here's why. When you're taking a traditional land vacation, you've got flexibility. If tomorrow's supposed to be 102 degrees, you can decide to sleep in, spend the afternoon at your hotel, visit a museum, or simply wait until the evening when it cools down. You can adjust your plans. A cruise does not work that way. When your ship arrives in Santorini, that's your Santorini day. When you dock in Mykonos, that's your Mykonos day. When you're in Naples or Ephesus or any other port, that's your opportunity. By 5 or 6 o'clock that afternoon, the ship is leaving. You don't get another chance. That's why I think the weather matters even more on a Mediterranean cruise than it does on a traditional European vacation. Now let's talk about the other thing we noticed, the crowds. Now let's be realistic. Rome is never empty, neither is Santorini or Mykonos. You're still going to see plenty of people. Shoulder season doesn't mean that you're going to have famous landmarks all to yourself, but there is a huge difference between busy and overwhelming. We could stop for pictures without feeling rushed. We could actually hear ourselves talk. We could wander down side streets that weren't packed shoulder to shoulder with tour groups. Restaurants still had people. The piazzas still had energy, but the cities felt comfortable instead of chaotic. Watching social media this summer really reminded me of that. So many people are posting about spending hours in line, trying to find shade, or planning their day around the hottest part of the afternoon. That was not our experience. The weather allowed us to focus on the destination instead of constantly thinking about the heat. And when I look back at that trip, it's probably the biggest compliment I can give early May. At this point, you've probably heard me mention the term shoulder season several times, but what does that exactly mean? Shoulder season is simply the time between the busy summer travel season and the quieter winter months. For the Mediterranean, there are really two shoulder seasons. The first is the spring shoulder season, which generally runs from late April to early June, and the second is the fall shoulder season, which is generally late September through the end of October, and sometimes even into early November, depending on where you're traveling. Those are the months where, in our experience, everything starts to come together. The weather is usually warm enough to comfortably spend all day outside. Restaurants and attractions are fully open. Cruise ships are sailing full itineraries, but you're often avoiding the hottest temperatures and the largest summer crowds. Let's talk about something that affects every vacation, your budget. If you've watched our channel for any length of time, you know that we love finding value. Not because we're trying to travel as cheaply as possible, because every dollar we don't have to spend on getting somewhere is another dollar we can spend on enjoying where we are. Think about airfare. Flying to Europe from the United States during the middle of the summer can easily cost $1,500 or even more per person. For two people, that's $3,000 before you've even checked into your hotel. If you're traveling in May or October, This might save you $400 to $500 per ticket. That's $800 to $1,000 you can use somewhere else. The same thing often happens with cruise fares. Move your sailing just a few weeks earlier or a few weeks later, and sometimes you'll find exactly the same itinerary for significantly less money. Hotels often follow that same pattern. Rome, Athens, Barcelona, they're all incredible cities, but they're also cities where hotel prices can change dramatically depending on when you visit. When you add together lower airfare, lower cruise fares, and lower hotel costs, traveling during shoulder season can save a surprising amount of money. For us, it's the best balance of weather, crowds, cost, and overall enjoyment. So this brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning of this video. If someone handed us 3 free Mediterranean cruises, one departing in January, one in early May, and one in the middle of July, which one would we choose? For us, the answer would be early May, without hesitation. Not because July would be a bad vacation, because it wouldn't, and not because January wasn't fantastic, because it was. But early May gave us the best overall experience. The weather was comfortable, the crowds were manageable. We spent long days exploring cities without feeling worn out by the heat. The cruise, flights, and hotel offered great value, and perhaps most importantly, we stopped thinking about logistics and simply enjoyed Europe. That's exactly what we're looking for every time we travel. Maximizing a vacation is not always about spending more money. Sometimes it's simply about making better decisions. Choosing to arrive a day early instead of rushing to the port. Walking a little further to find that amazing local restaurant. Taking time to sit in a cafe instead of trying to check off another attraction. Or choosing a time of year that lets you enjoy the destination instead of fighting the weather. That's what travel has become for us. Not just seeing more places, but experiencing those places more fully. If you've taken a Mediterranean cruise, I'd love to hear about your experience. What month did you go? Would you do that same time again? Or has your experience changed the way you think about planning your next trip? Leave a comment below. I read every one of them, and I think that your experiences will help other travelers just as much as ours. If you're planning your own Mediterranean cruise, we've created an entire series of videos from both of our trips: Rome travel tips, embarkation day, excursions, ship tours, and everything we learned along the way. I'll link those here at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep maximizing every vacation day.